Hello and welcome to our May Spotlight webinar with Syxsense. Today, we have our industry expert, Graham Brooks, here to give us an inside look into deploying and managing devices trust using Syxsense Cortex. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat and Graham will reach out after to answer those. And with that, Graham Brooks.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. All right. So today I get to walk through endpoint automation and device attestation using Syxsense. We're going to spend a lot of our time looking at the nuts and bolts of the product and how you can use it to perform both those attestation checks to validate that your devices are in compliance, as well as automations that you can deploy to enforce that compliance. Before I get there, though, I do need to do some housekeeping. First, I need to walk you through how our product works, how it's built, so you can understand the context for this conversation. And then we're going to give you the 30,000-foot overview of what Zero Trust is, so you understand what the conversation is going towards. So first, Syxsense. We're architecturally a cloud-hosted platform. A lot of people are familiar with the term SaaS, or software as a service. We live in Azure Cloud specifically, and the way that you're going to be able to manage endpoints and support them is through our agent, which you'll install on each asset that you want to manage. Then that asset will talk back up to the Syxsense console and inform it of events. We're going to spend a lot of time today talking about those events, specifically attestation events. And that's essentially all you really need to know architecturally. The other thing is Zero Trust. What is it? Why do we care? What does it matter? Zero Trust is actually a philosophy or a paradigm more than it is a tool set. It's essentially this idea that devices need to be attested to every single time they attempt to access a resource. I'm talking about devices specifically, so that's what Syxsense covers. But Zero Trust is a lot bigger than just devices. People will have network attestation, they will have user attestation. There's a lot of different ways you can look at it. But essentially, the idea is if you want to access Outlook on the web, when you go to that website and you put in your username and password, it doesn't just approve based off of those two statements. It's also going to look at other things, like when was the last time your device had a software update? Are you currently using the company VPN? Do you have something misconfigured in your environment or on that device that's scary that needs to be fixed? Those are all of the different partitions of asset management that you need to care about, that frankly a lot of people aren't addressing right now. And our platform can do a lot of different things, but one of the things we're great at is providing those device attestations. Okay, so that's kind of the background. Today, we're going to spend all of our time in the console on this tab right here. This is our Zero Trust tool set. What we're going to do is build a new trust evaluation, and we're going to target it against a particular set of endpoints. Specifically, I'm thinking I'm going to look at my laptop environment. And so to do that, I'm going to start by creating this new trust eval. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it laptop trust. I'm going to hit save, give it a moment for it to load us into this new security posture window. And we're going to then start creating our different postures, our different device attestations. The very first one that I want to have in place is going to be a firewall status. This firewall status is just going to check to see if it's enabled or disabled. And based off of that statement, we are either going to trust this device or not trust this device. It's really basic. It's not particularly complicated to build these attestations. So here's that trusted statement, and then here's that disabled untrusted statement. Then all I have to do is give this a better name. I will call it firewall posture check. And then we hit that add new, and it's going to ask us, hey, so the thing you just built, how do you want this to work? What schedule do you want this to run on? I'm going to give this guy a schedule, and I'm going to say firewall posture check should run every 10 seconds. So that's the firewall posture check. It runs every 10 seconds. What if we want to make new requirements? What if we need it to have a requirement around antivirus as well? We could build as many of these as we need. So I'm going to call this one antivirus posture check. And I'm going to set it for 10 seconds as well. And we're going to have that one run a check to see if your AV platform is installed. If it isn't, it'll mark it as untrusted. And if it is, it'll trust the device. So drag over our find software. I'm going to pick on a vendor today that I really like. We're going to go with CrowdStrike. So CrowdStrike. You know, I don't remember if it's still CrowdStrike or if they changed it to Falcon, but we're going to keep it there just for this example. So we're going to check and see if CrowdStrike is there. If it's not found, we will again mark that device as untrusted. Bear with me a moment. Just drag over the action. There we go. And then we'll do the same thing that we did for our firewall policy if the device is found to have antivirus installed. So if it is there, great. If it's not, we mark the device as untrusted. Pretty simple, pretty basic. Here, I'm going to hit save. And now we have a couple postures. We have our firewall posture check, and we have our antivirus posture check. Now I want to enforce this because we have some schedules. We're doing this on 10-second rotations, but we need to define a device list, a context in which this work gets done. If I go over to devices here on my left-hand sidebar, you can see that I have a list of assets in here. I've got some Linux servers, I've got some iPhones and iPads, I've got a MacBook Pro, that one might be relevant. And then I have a bunch of desktop devices, and I've got another 2 Macs, and I've got some other Linux servers. So we have a wide distribution of assets that we need to enforce against. In this context, I said this was for laptops. So we are focusing just on those Macs and the MacBook Pro. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Zero Trust. I'm going to go to my trust evaluations, and I'm going to go to this laptop trust. And I'm going to tell it to publish this as a policy. And I'm going to look at those 3 laptop devices. So here, I'm going to target that MacBook Pro, and then we're going to target our 2 other Mac devices. I'm going to hit save, and now we have our specific targeted endpoints. If I save this policy and go down to deployments, you'll see that I now have a laptop trust. This is enforcing every 10 seconds, a check against the firewall and a check against the antivirus. If it's installed, awesome. If it's not, the asset then gets marked as untrusted. And you can see that actually in real time. Back on the home screen, you'll note that I have this patch health status. Got a small sliver of devices that are in a critical state, while the rest of the endpoints are marked as healthy. And then below that, I've got this configuration health as well. Most of my devices are non-compliant against high priority patches, but there's very few critical patches pending. And then here at the bottom, I've got that trust status. Most of my devices are trusted, and a couple of them are not. And that's in conformity with the different zero trust evaluations I have in place. As endpoints lose their compliance against patching, maybe a 0-day comes out and we scan it, we find it relevant to a few devices, you might see that trust evaluation kind of change a little bit. The list of devices that are untrusted might expand a few more endpoints wide as that non-compliance appears in the environment. And then you want to do something about it. You don't want to just have endpoints out there in a state of untrust, not being allowed to access resources. You want to be able to give them back the access they need. To do that, we're going to head over to the automation engine Cortex. And we're going to look at a couple of the workflows that I already have built that we can use to take a device from that non-compliant state and move it into a state of compliance. So here, I'm going to go over to my intelligent endpoint posture list. We're going to look at my antivirus posture check. All right, pretty basic. All it's doing is asking if the antivirus product is installed. If it's not found, we're going to deploy it. And then after we've deployed it, we're then going to reevaluate the device and check and see if the AV platform is there. And if it is, great. The device is marked trusted. Policy we already have that runs every 10 seconds. If I go over here to my previous run, I've actually deployed this on quite a few devices. You can see that here. Gbrooks desktop, util, whole bunch of endpoints. And we're just looking through all of those devices to see if the software is there. And remember, this is in real time. So as new devices come online, check in, this is going to update. You actually saw it already update there in the top. Then if we find the installation, awesome. We're going to install it, deploy it, get it updated. After we've done that work, we will then reevaluate the device, make sure that the software is installed after we've deployed the remediation, thereby allowing the device to be put back into a state of compliance. Okay, so that's part of the picture. What about the state where a device isn't trusted? What do I do there? How do I enforce some sort of compliance? How do I disallow them access to websites they should only be able to see if their device is in a healthy state? How would I enforce that using Syxsense? Well, it's also just another Cortex workflow. So here, I'm going to make a new blank workflow. And I'm going to ask it a question. I'm going to say, hey, is your firewall disabled? Okay, let's look. This is already one of those posture checks we already looked at. If it's disabled, all right, let's enable it. That's by default also, by the way, going to fix one of your postures. We want to make it as easy as possible to bring a device into compliance. So we have a posture check that looks if the device is in an unhealthy state, if the firewall is disabled, and then enforces that firewall rule whenever it's found. So that's one of your posture checks that is now secured. But what if there's other things like patching is not compliant, or you've got some configurations that are really broken? We need to be able to enforce some sort of restrictions on the endpoint in that scenario. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, okay, enable the firewall, great. Next, let's enforce some firewall rules on this device. Here, I'm going to say all of these options here are good. We're going to add a new rule. It's going to be a network address that we're blocking. And yes, the action is blocked. And here, I'm going to say https://outlook.com. So if anyone tries to go to that root domain for Outlook, it's going to block them. If I wanted, I could actually throw 15 or 20 different firewall rules at this device. It doesn't have to be a single action. And then I can set this to run on a cadence that makes sense. Maybe it's once every 10 minutes. Maybe it's once every half second. You can create whatever sort of policy you want. The idea being that if a device is non-compliant, if it's got a firewall rule that's missing, we'll enforce it. And then if there's other things that are missing, if they try to go to Outlook, it won't let them. It'll just give them a 404 error. And then if they're an admin on their device and they try to force the access, if they create an allow rule or they turn off this block rule, it'll reinforce it on whatever cadence you want. In this case, it could be 1 or 5 seconds interval. We'll just reapply that rule to the device. And it's not a heavy workload. This is going to take all of 0.25 seconds. It's stupid easy to deploy this, and it's not going to take a lot of bandwidth from the device to keep this enforcing on the endpoint. Okay, so that's a lot of the content around Zero Trust. We've walked you through how to create new Zero Trust enforcement. We've shown you how to create a policy that would re-provision a device into compliance. And then right here, we've also shown you some blocking rules that you can put in place when a device is in a state of non-compliance. The last thing I want to go over is reporting. I want you to be able to see how we can actually review the work that's been done, see which endpoints might be in a state of non-compliance, and then allow you to take direct action on those assets to fix the problems that are keeping them in a non-trusted state. So at a high level, we've got reports like this. This is our security risk assessment. It will show you your overall vulnerable state. Do you have critical devices? Do you have high priority vulnerabilities in your environment? Do you have low priority risks? We'll also show you a cadence. So over time, how many vulnerabilities are being found in the environments that you're including in your assessment. This environment, you can see that I actually had a huge uptick over the course of a single day. There's actually a story here. I added about, 30 devices to my console over the course of that day. They're all virtual machines for testing. And because I added those devices, the Syxsense agent that was installed on the endpoint saw that the devices hadn't been scanned. So it did a vulnerability assessment, marked all those devices as vulnerable against a number of high priority issues. And so my overall compliance, well, it went way down by the number of vulnerabilities increasing by about double. That's a really useful story to be able to see in your environment. And that also maps to the not trusted state. So if you're seeing a huge amount more vulnerabilities in your environment, if you've got a policy in place that disables trust, if a device has critical vulnerabilities, you'll probably see the number of compliant endpoints that are trusted drastically decreases, that risk increases. Super important to be able to see that information, which you can do here. And then as I scroll down, I can see the different types of endpoints. Are they servers? Are they laptops? Are they desktops? What kind of devices are in our environment? And what kind of vulnerabilities are they detecting? As we scroll down, we can see the different locations, the different office buildings, the different IP ranges that you have in your environment and which ones are most impacted by the found vulnerabilities. Obviously, as well, we can show you what operating systems are in play. And then most importantly, we can show you the individual items of non-compliance that are causing your environment to be non-compliant. So here, antivirus. It's the most important thing that we're seeing, 676 total vulnerabilities discovered. Windows policy comes next with 557 found vulnerabilities, and it just kind of breaks down from there. If you want, you can then enforce compliance against those specific issues on a device-by-device basis or at scale. So let's say that we found something that we don't want in our environment. We need to fix it. Perhaps it's this machine inactivity. I've got a lot of devices that are currently affected by it. So if I want to fix that, maybe increase my compliance, decrease the number of untrusted devices in my environment, all I have to do is go over to vulnerabilities, select the security heading, and then I'm going to look at that name again. It was the machine activity limit. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to go over to search, paste that in here. It should populate with the device or the title of the vulnerability. So here you can see I've actually already fixed this issue. I've got 41 devices as of the last time I scanned, which was a week or two ago, that have already been fixed for it. So let's actually choose a different example and see if we can find something a little bit more relevant. So here, I'm gonna open up my queries list, and I'm gonna filter for vulnerabilities that I know are active, that are priority, that I have a remediation in place for. All right, so I've got this speculative execution attack. Ooh, this one's pretty aggressive. I've got 41 devices affected. This is actually a fairly famous vulnerability. If I want to, I can actually view details in our platform, which will walk you through why you should care about this particular issue, along with some information on how to remediate it. With Syxsense, I actually have a tool, it's Cortex, we've already been using it a bunch, that you can use to remediate that vulnerability. And we do, in fact, have some remediations in place for this issue. Our content team writes all of our remediations, they test them, and they also deploy them at scale for some of our customers who use this as a managed service. And so we have a lot of positive experience under our belt with this platform, and it's been used extremely effectively for many of our customers. Here, if you want, you can actually review the exact work that we're doing to remediate this particular vulnerability. I trust our content team, so I am simply going to tell it to fix the issue. If I hit run now, it is then going to deploy out at scale across all endpoints in my environment, checking to see if any of them have that vulnerability. And then if they do, it's going to remediate it as it's being found. In the background then, on my home screen, if any of my devices are marked as untrusted because of that speculative execution issue, you should then see that list of non-compliant endpoints slowly but surely decrease. Unfortunately for me, I happen to know that my devices are untrusted because some of them don't have my AV platform installed. So remediating that one vulnerability isn't going to magically fix the entirety of my environment, but that is long-term the goal. You should be able to create a set list of policies that you want to enforce, and then just see them running in the background, enforcing that compliance as devices move in and out of your network, as they move online or offline. And you can see that actually here, I've got that workflow that we just deployed. It's running. I've got 41 devices that have already checked in. They've just started the scan. I've got one device already that just finished its deployment and it's doing a post-deployment evaluation. And we should see in just a moment here some of those devices check in as successfully deployed. So recap, what have we gone through today? We've talked about how you can manage your zero trust postures and evaluations. We've talked a little bit about how Syxsense is architected and why you should care about zero trust. We've also walked through how you can enforce compliance and even block access to resources if a device is in a state of non-compliance. It's a lot of ground. There's a whole lot more we could get into, but I want to be respectful of all of y'all's time. So if you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love some time to discuss how Syxsense might be helpful for you and your organization. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and yeah, talk later.